What do Egyptian understandings of the afterlife tell us about their world? When we think about ancient Egypt, we typically think about mummies and such things as King Tut or the Sphinx, along with other famous people or structures. However, we don't take into account the Egyptians' practices and customs that made the Egyptian culture. Some of these things are their burial practices, their funerary inscriptions that led to Egyptian mortality, and the moral requirements indicated in the Book of the Dead that were built upon Ma'at, a concept rooted in Egyptian distinctive social hierarchy. Point one, Egyptian burial practices that emerge from the religion's unique cosmology. Deaths and burials were very different than they are now. They had their afterlife had a huge influence on their burial practices. The three strategies that they would use for the burials would be one would be the body was taken to a place of purification, washed, then brought to the house of beauty where the body was mummified. The second would be the oil of cedar was injected, which prevented liquids from escaping the body. The body was then put in natron and was left for a few days. And the last day, the oil is drained, and the effects of this is so strong that it leaves the stomach in a liquid state, where it is returned to the owner. The third is for a more poor or lower class Egyptians would be to clear the intestines with a purge and keep the body in natron for 70 days, and then give the body back to the owners. A quote by Herodotus says, quote, "The embalmers, when a body is brought to them, produce specimen models in wood, painted to resemble nature and graded in quality," end quote. Funerary inscriptions and wisdom literature provide us with important insight to Egyptian mortality. Although our ideas of ethics and morality seem obvious, even self-evident, some of these ideas are not universal. We can learn from what the Egyptians believed in from their writings inscribed in the tombs. Some were obviously not acceptable, like theft and murder, blasphemy, stealing from temple offerings, tampering with grain measurements, lying, etc., things that were obviously bad and still are nowadays. Others had a larger influence on things we wouldn't consider a big deal. For instance, a quote from the Declaration of Innocence by Unknown that says, quote, "I have done no injustice to people, nor have I mistreated an animal. I have done no wrong," end quote. So, the fact that they have not mistreated animals was a very clear sight into what they believed in and what they found important in their lives, in their daily lives. Point three, implications of understanding Ma'at for Egyptian morality. Ma'at was the cosmic and social order of the universe established by the creator or God. Creator God. Ma'at was personified by a goddess named Ma'at. The goddess represented the divine harmony and balance of the universe. The people of Egypt had an obligation to uphold Ma'at through obedience to the king. And a quote by Joshua J. Marks says, quote, "The king's primary duty was to uphold Ma'at and maintain the balance between the people and their gods. In doing so, the king needed to make sure that those inferior were well taken care for. Borders were secure, and rites and rituals were performed according to the accepted tradition." So his job was to make sure that people were safe and that everyone was in a comfortable place in their lives. And if he would do that, then he would be blessed by Ma'at. And so would the people by upholding the kings, which is what Ma'at wanted the king to do for her. When we think about ancient Egypt, we think about mummies such as King Tut, along with other famous people or structures like the Sphinx or pyramids, etc. However, we don't take into account the Egyptian practices and customs that made Egyptian culture. Some of these things are the burial practices, funerary inscriptions that led that led insights to Egyptian mortality and the moral requirements indicated in the Book of the Dead that were built upon Ma'at, a concept rooted in Egyptians' distinctive social hierarchy. Thank you.